Right, hi everybody, I'm Natalie from Celestics. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all today. The topic of today's webinar is our breach and attack simulation with Cymulate, and we'd like to demonstrate to you today how you can be empowered to take a proactive approach to your cybersecurity stance. Throughout the presentation, someone on staff will be managing the chat functionality where you can enter questions and comments at any time during the webinar. The Q&A button is located at the bottom of the Ring Central meeting panel. This session is being recorded and I will send you a copy of the recording to you once it's available. I'd now like to start off today's session and introduce and hand over to Tim Ager, VP of EMEA for Cymulate.
Thanks, Natalie, and good morning, everyone. So, yep, as mentioned, this session is to focus on some of the concepts of breach and attack simulation and how Cymulate and Celestics approach that concept. In terms of the session today, we're going to go through a brief bit of slideware just to set the scene and give you some context and explain how the platform operates. And then we're going to jump into a top-level demonstration so you can actually see the platform in operation and see the workflow of how it's used. So as part of that, we're going to demonstrate some of the outputs you get from the system as well. So first of all, just to set the scene and understand a bit more about what BAS or breach and attack simulation actually is, a couple of examples on the screen here, both differing slightly. So on the right-hand side, the Gartner definition, I think very, very clear. It's allowing organizations really to be able to test the effectiveness of their security controls across the whole kill chain in a very consistent manner using simulated attacks. On the left-hand side, the NIST CRC definition talks about security control testing. And this is a really interesting sort of difference in terminology, because security control validation or testing is something which is at the core of breach and attack simulation. If you're able to test and validate your controls are working effectively, that's a great start. But if you identify that things aren't working effectively, being able to work out the extent to which that's a problem and being able to address it effectively is very powerful. So Cymulate addresses breach and attack simulation. We are a four and a half year old cybersecurity business out of Israel. We have now just about 250 customers worldwide, and we are delivering for them a breach and attack simulation platform. And what that enables them to do is really three things. The first thing is it allows them to build and launch many thousands of simulated attacks across the whole kill chain against their organization's infrastructure and security controls. Once that's been achieved, the platform is going to generate for you a risk score. And that risk score is going to be able to show you really in context how effective your controls are actually working. And we'll touch on that risk score later on during the demonstration. The second element of the platform is basically giving you the ability to identify what types of exploits, commands, and techniques you are exposed to, and then remediate those issues. So the platform doesn't just tell you that your email gateway is operating quite well, but your endpoint controls are really terrible, for example. It's going to give you a prescriptive list of all of the exploits, commands, and techniques that could successfully be delivered or executed in your environment, and then mitigation advice to help you to actually fix those problems and tighten your controls. The benefit there is you can go back into stage one and then run a retest after you've made those remediation steps. And in theory, if the steps have been carried out effectively, you should see your risk score starting to come down. And that's very powerful for the third element of the platform, which is all about reporting and visibility. So the platform is going to give you plain English reports that can give you the ability to take to the business, to management meetings, board meetings, budget meetings, and explain this is what our security looks like right now. This is where we have exposures, and therefore this is what we need to do about it. Would you agree? So now, rather than taking recommendations from a pen test once a year, we're taking quantifiable, referenceable, risk-based information to a management team and giving them the ability to make decisions based on their approach to that information and to risk. So as I mentioned just now, this is a very, very staged approach, very methodical, simulate the attacks, evaluate the results, carry out the remediations. And then because this is an automated system, it's going to give you the ability to run these assessments and repeat them on a frequency of your choosing. So rather than, again, the limitations of pen testing in particular being very, very limited by time, this is something you can run with relative ease as often as you wish to do so. We're typically helping organizations answer a range of questions, and there's just a few of those on the screen now to start with, really. And the first one is, do you know how secure your company is right now? You've all joined a session today, you're here for an hour, hopefully. And at that time, do you know how secure your business is? Do you know whether your email gateway is defending against the latest ransomware exploits? Do you know if your endpoints can repel those and stop them from installing or running? Do you know that you're secure, or do you not know what you don't know? What's your current feeling about how secure the business is? Do you have a way currently to measure the effectiveness of your security controls? And if not, how do you know whether they're giving you best security, best performance, and best value? That's a real challenging question to answer. Do you know where your most critical vulnerabilities are? You may well be running vulnerability scanning tools. You may know that you have a whole list of vulnerabilities and CVEs that could be exploited, but do you know whether they will be exploited? Are they even exploitable vulnerabilities? Do your current controls defend you against the latest exploits? Not just the known techniques and tactics that we're all familiar with, but there's new emerging exploits coming out on a daily basis. Are you concerned about someone coming into your IT department on a Friday afternoon and saying, I've just heard about this particular exploit in the news, are we safe? And what's your process for identifying whether you're safe and answering that question? It's probably going to involve a lot of manual testing, speaking to the vendors. It's going to take time and it may not be comprehensive. And also, I guess there's other sort of commercial and business benefits here. Do you know how to attempt to justify more budget spend, more resource, more products, more time? And if you can't demonstrate that, then how do you currently try to get that resource from the business? Do you know how to generate the right budget, or do you literally hope that the organization is going to give you a pot of money and then you can go and spend that on what you want? And then finally, around compliance. Compliance drives a lot of security spend, but it is possible to comply without necessarily being as secure as you could be. So do you know whether your security controls are actually meeting your compliance overheads? That's a real challenge considering the sheer volume of compliance overheads we all now face. So traditionally, organizations have done one of a few things, but pen testing is really the starting point here and what we're here to address with proactive testing with breach and attack simulation. Pen testing, really important. Manual penetration testing is something that a lot of organizations need to have from a regulatory perspective because it's a third party coming in and checking your work. You know, it's oversight on what you've done. But there's many challenges with pen testing. They're limited by scope. I don't know any organization that pen tests their entire organization's infrastructure every single time. It's not consistent. It's not something you could justify doing every time because of the sheer time it would take and the expense. And as a result, organizations that I typically speak with are penetration testing the range of services or network segments or whatever it may be that was stood up in the last 12 months since the last pen test. So it's not answering the question, how secure is your business? It's basically giving you oversight over the most recent changes you've made to your network. And that's not really fit for purpose when you're trying to demonstrate how secure you are. So organizations have attempted to look for red teaming. Red teaming is something that a lot of organizations now look at with a view to trying to make the concepts of penetration testing more persistent, if you like. So red teaming is going to be more comprehensive. It's going to take more time. It will take more time to actually run the assessments. But the challenge still remains. It's still a one-hit activity. It's still a photographic snapshot of that moment in time. It's probably going to take you a lot more time to prepare for it, 4 to 6 weeks probably to build up to a red team exercise. It's probably going to run for 4 weeks. And at the end of it, yes, you've had a very comprehensive workout, but the next week when there's a new exploit, it doesn't answer the question whether you can defend against those new exploits. And that's why when you look at things that the analysts say, for example, this is an example from Gartner, that really penetration testing is no longer fit for current usage. It's something that's been around for a very long time. It has a very valid part in the history of cybersecurity, and it still has a part to play now. But it doesn't really help to answer the question as to how secure you are or how operationally effective you are as a business. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend on testing. It doesn't matter how much money you spend on security controls. Even organizations with the largest budgets don't necessarily know how operationally effective they are. And that's because people buy products, they run them, they get them set up, and then can we all honestly say that we're all experts in all of those 10, 20, 30, 40 different security controls we have in place? Probably not. And that means that we are subject to controls not being updated, not being configured effectively. One of the most common misconfigurations or oversights that we see in working with our customers is they haven't enabled basic functionality like SSL inspection at their web gateways, meaning that anything coming in over port 443 is not being scanned or filtered or managed in any way. That's not even a backdoor into the office. That is a wide open front door for any type of activist who knows how to exploit it. So it's not whether you've got the best products, it's have you configured them effectively for the purpose of your business. So of course, we've touched on some of these things already, so I'm not going to labor the points. But we've all seen, and we probably all use vulnerability scanning tools, really, really important and very complementary to what Cymulate does. But ultimately, they're giving you a list of things, typically. They're giving you a list of CVEs and vulnerabilities that you are exposed to on your devices, your servers, your workstations, and so on. But they don't really give you huge amounts of context. Do you know that those vulnerabilities are even exploitable? Do you know that exploits targeting your organization would even leverage those CVEs? If not, then you're left with a mighty long list of CVEs and uncertainty as to the prioritization you need to actually patch and update them. Manual penetration tests, limited by scope, limited by skill set of the people doing it, limited by time, and limited by frequency. So important if you are regulated and need a third party to sign a piece of paper or rubber stamp that your controls are doing well enough, but really not covering sufficiently to answer the question, are you secure? And again, manual penetration tests depend, the scope of them depends on what you want them to do. Some will include secure code reviews or application penetration testing. Some will focus specifically on the endpoint and assuming breach. That's not really going to answer questions over how well your email gateway is working. And if 75% of attacks come in via email, wouldn't you like to test to make sure your email gateway is stopping those exploits from coming in the first place and not necessarily having to assume breach? It seems a bit defeatist in my opinion. And red teaming we've talked about, clearly it's a great step forward, but very expensive, very complex, and time consuming. So let's move on a little bit and talk about what breach and attack simulation actually brings to the table and how it kind of changes that dynamic around security control testing. So Cymulate produces a breach and attack simulation platform, which is going to give you the ability to test all of the cyber security controls you have across the kill chain against not just known exploits and techniques, but the latest exploits as well. And it's going to give you the ability to identify, but also to mitigate and then improve your security posture and bring down your risk. The platform itself is primarily SaaS-based, so it's really, really quick to get up and running. This does not require server-side or network-side infrastructure. It does not require agents running on every single one of your devices. What we typically need is a single target device in your network, which is representative of the many. So if you have a standard production build for your endpoints, your workstations, your servers, then ultimately we're going to require one or maybe two agents running in your network. And the logic in our testing is that if we can land exploits into that test inbox, if we can install malware on that test device, if we could move laterally or steal data from that device, then we should be able to do it from any device of the same profile. So it's very lightweight, it is not disruptive, it is not going to cause downtime in your organization. And one of the real benefits of that approach is because we're simulating everything, you can run this in your production environment and test your actual production controls. Unlike other solutions in this area that will leverage live exploits, and so as a result, you are really going to have to run those in a pre-production or a test environment because there is genuine risk of them causing problems in your production environment. Everything Cymulate does, as the name would suggest, is simulated. So you can run it in your production environment and get a true test of your live production security controls. Now, you can run agents in multiple instances if you wish to do so. There's various use cases where that would be relevant. So if you wanted to run security testing across multiple sites, if you have multiple branch offices or offices around the globe, or you're going to acquire another business, you could run agents or push agents out to each of those locations. And this platform is multi-tenanted and multi-site capable. So you can test all of the controls of all of your different office locations from the relative comfort of your IT department or your home office. You could also run agents in multiple locations if you wanted to test for lateral movement across network segments, for example. So you could run an agent on your PCI network or your very sensitive network segment that you're confident that nothing can really reach that's unauthorized. And if one of the other agents running on the network reaches that agent in that secured network segment, then clearly a change has been made that has meant it's no longer secure and it can be reached. At that point, our tests will stop and alert you to that fact, and you know you've got a hole to go and plug in your internal firewalling possibly. So far, I think it sounds quite compelling. Certainly, that's what our customers are telling us. But this wouldn't be quite as appealing if you had to build and customize and learn all about all of the exploits yourselves, because this is then going to introduce huge amounts of time overhead and burden onto the team. So what we have there is a fully automated approach to this. So everything we do in the platform comes with a range of templates. So you can launch all of the known exploits within a particular module. So if that's email, for example, you could be launching ransomware, office payloads, trojans, and worms at that particular test inbox, really within 3 or 4 mouse clicks. It's designed to be as automated as possible because your time is much better spent in analyzing the results and the output rather than running the tests themselves. That being said, you do have the ability to customize attacks within the platform as well. So it can be really granular. That's everything from building your own phishing campaign, something quite straightforward, but you can go all the way up to building your own advanced persistent threats. So if you wanted to test your defense in depth controls, you can actually build your own your own APT rather, and launch it against the organization and see how far through it gets. Really comprehensive for those organizations that want to test their control resilience against really complex exploits. Another key point is that reporting is available immediately. As soon as the test is run, you're straight into the results and trying to work out what to do to remediate and improve your posture. So you do not have to wait a week or two for the results to come in. I mentioned we covered the full kill chain, and this slide is going to depict the full kill chain. I'm very sure you're all very familiar with this, and so I'm not going to labor the point on this slide. The key thing of interest here is that there are 7 circles on the screen, and those are touch points within the kill chain. They are areas where exploits are going to try and come in or move or run, but they're also areas where you as organizations are going to have some levels of security controls or policies in place. And clearly that's going to vary depending on your level of security maturity. Most of our customers, probably all of our customers, actually have some kind of email gateway controls. They all have some kind of endpoint security, but not everyone's moved on to looking at lateral movement controls and privileged account abuse, for example. So these are areas where you can test your security controls, but what Cymulate produces is a platform which is modular. And the benefit here is not a technical one, really, it's a commercial one, which is that you don't need to consume everything. You choose the modules for the controls that you most want to test. It's an annual subscription license that gives you the ability to run unlimited testing of that control or of that technology during that 12-month period. So if you've already got a phishing awareness platform in place, you don't necessarily need to consume hours. If you haven't looked at lateral movement controls yet, running our lateral movement test is going to tell you what you already know, which is you have no controls in place. So probably not that valuable for you. So first things first, you choose the modules for the controls that you most want to test. So what does it do from left to right? So just to give you like a 1 or 2 liner per module to set the scene, and then we can actually show you this in operation. So the first one is the recon or reconnaissance module. This is a very important part of the platform because it really extends the kill chain. It's going to give you the ability to analyze and assess your public-facing attack surface. So by entering things like your domain details into the platform, we can basically search the public internet, the dark web, all the places where nasty people hide and trade in your data and content. And we can pull back a list of all of the data that could be used to target the organization. So email addresses, IP addresses, usernames, credentials, whatever it may be. And the platform will then show you this is how these credentials or this information could be used in an attack. And then it can help you to start chaining your own attacks to see whether it could be used and whether that would be successful. Then we move into the things that we're all very familiar with, the email gateway. We all know how risky it is. We all know there's an increase in email-based attacks, and I'm sure it's going to continue for a very long time to come. Do you know whether that wonderful email gateway that you spent a lot of money on is actually blocking and filtering the type of content that it should be? So the Cymulate platform gives you the ability to launch up to about 17,000 simulated email exploits against that target inbox in the network. And the single Cymulate agent that's running on that device has a number of email rules that identify if any emails land in that inbox from the Cymulate web service and auto forwards a response back to the Cymulate web service. And that's how the platform knows what types of exploits can successfully be delivered into your corporate inboxes. It doesn't identify whether users will interact with them. That comes later in the kill chain. This is testing your email gateway configurations and policies to make sure it's blocking the things that it should be blocking. Web gateway testing, very important in collaboration or in combination with the email gateway, because a lot of email attacks are going to try and land in an inbox and may recall the user to interact with a link to go outbound to a website that's going to try and then deliver something nasty back in again. So with the web gateway test, you have the ability to simulate a user on your corporate network attempting to go outbound to connect with a malicious website, whether that's on purpose or completely by mistake, inadvertently. We're going to see whether it's possible for a workstation to connect out to a website that's associated with ransomware and phishing and command and control services. We can also simulate a command and control server trying to connect back into that workstation. So can users go out to the internet and find something nasty, and can that nasty thing respond back? This is going to be able to deliver a very comprehensive workout of your web gateway and your firewall policies, and it will identify very commonly misconfigured or overlooked configurations like ticking that SSL inspection box on your gateway. And then there's WAV testing. WAV testing is becoming increasingly important because everyone's moving to the cloud so quickly, of course. Don't need to tell anyone that. But ultimately, a lot of people outsource their web applications and services to a third party who hosts them. And they're also, by default, outsourcing the security of those websites and services as well. So do you know whether your public-facing web portals and applications are defended well enough against things like SQL injection attacks, cross-site scripting, attacks that expose sensitive data, typically the OWASP top 10 payloads? Cymulate's platform gives you the ability to test all of your public-facing web presence and see whether any of those types of attacks could successfully affect your organization. Phishing awareness, everyone's familiar with this. I'm not going to labor the point, but Cymulate sees phishing slightly differently. You should, of course, be running phishing awareness campaigns against your staff. It would be very great if you could actually run awareness campaigns and training for them as well. Cymulate gives you the ability to build and launch phishing campaigns and to report on who opened, who clicked links, who entered credentials into that dummy website. What we do not do is provide ongoing user awareness. For Cymulate, phishing is about context. If you know that you have an avid clicker of phishing emails and that person happens to be Jim in finance for sake of argument, then yes, you need to educate Jim. but maybe Jim is not too bothered about looking at phishing emails or trying to be safe, or maybe Jim is targeted by attacks that are so sophisticated that they would catch out most people based on his role. So we need to look at whether the security controls will kick in and defend people like Jim if he does the inevitable and clicks on something that is dodgy. And that's where the context comes in. With the Cymulate Endpoint module, you could run the agent on Jim's PC or on another PC of the same profile as Jim's or in the same network segment. And now we can start to see whether malware could install on the device and could it run. So the Endpoint module does two things. First of all, we can attempt to drop all of the known malware hashes and signatures onto that device and see whether they can physically install. So it's going to give your AV solutions a thorough workout. The second thing we can do is attempt to run all of the known malicious behaviors at the endpoint and see whether they can execute and run. Things like the ability for malware to find a way to elevate privileges, to move laterally, to evade defenses, to run command and control services. So there we're mapping into something called the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Most of our customers are trying to see how their security maps into MITRE, and this platform is going to give you about 99% coverage of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, techniques and tactics. So it's a really powerful way to work out your endpoint security and make sure it's doing exactly what it should be doing, because the endpoint is the beachhead into your organization. So it really is the battleground. Lateral movement testing answers the question, how is lateral movement possible on my network? So this is great if you are looking at privileged access management and lateral movement as upcoming projects. And this is something that's going to allow you to use an agent, the Cymulate agent, to move like a worm across your network. It sounds terrifying, but everything we do is simulated. So in the case of our agent running like a worm, you are in complete control of the criteria of that assessment. So you can limit which network segments it can try and move to. You can control which protocols it tries to leverage, which methods it can use for obtaining and reusing credentials. The net result is we're going to run in memory, we're going to propagate, but we are not going to blue screen or lock people out of their devices. What we are going to do is give you a report, which is like a blast radius, a network map of all of the workstations, databases, servers, network segments we could reach. And we're going to show you how we did it, which protocols we used, which methods for using credentials we used, and it's then going to give you the ability to then tighten those controls. So if you are looking at privileged access management right now, do you actually know what it is that you require? Because the answer to lateral movement and privilege abuse is not singular. There are many ways of dealing with it. It may well be that some basic AD permissions and hygiene would help. Maybe you need a password vault. Maybe you need better network segmentation, or potentially you do need a full all singing, all dancing PAM solution. But there are different costs associated to all of those different outcomes. And far too often in my career, I've seen people looking at privileged access management solutions in particular, because a pen tester said, you need to look at privileged access. And so the first reaction is, let's look for a privileged access management solution. Not trivial, not cheap, very complicated, and may not meet your requirements. So if you want to know what your requirements actually are, you can test for it. Equally important, if you've deployed solutions or configurations or policies to control lateral movement, really important to make sure they're actually enforced and working properly. Finally, we have two other modules. Immediate threats at the bottom of the screen. That's where we do proactive threat hunting, and we upload to the platform on a daily basis the latest exploits that we see in the wild, and our customers can then test their controls' ability to defend against those in real time. So the next time someone comes in and says, I've just heard about this Soda Nakibi thing, or this Snake thing, or the Garmin attack, are we safe? You're typically 3 or 4 mouse clicks away from answering that question and being able to do something about it. And then finally, the full kill chain module. Everything we've talked about so far is individually licensed and really giving you the ability to test those controls independently of each other. And if you test all of them, you're going to get a view of really the context of your defense in-depth security. But if you'd really like to know how your defense in-depth security all hangs together, this is a module that's going to give you the ability to do that. So it allows you to build your own advanced persistent threat. How do I want to deliver this exploit into the business? An email with an attachment, an email with a link to a malicious site. Who am I targeting? What's my distribution list to send this email to? What's the malicious behavior going to be? Is it going to try and install and after it's been interacted with, run a macro and then basically start locking files at the endpoint? Is it going to try and install and communicate back to the internet and download some tools? Is it going to try and move laterally like a worm? And if so, how do we want to try and move? And once you've built those criteria and you hit launch, you are testing your controls in context. Does the email land? Yes or no? Does the user interact with it? Yes or no? Does the malicious payload execute? Yes or no? Does it run? Yes or no? Where can it get to? And all of a sudden, you can see the entire defense in-depth controls in one dashboard that shows you exactly where you need to fine-tune. So hopefully that gives you an overview of what breach and attack simulation can do. I appreciate it's quite comprehensive, but please remember it's modular, so you focus on the modules that you will get most value from. At that stage, I'm just going to end the show and jump into the dashboard. Natalie, can you just confirm that you're still seeing that screen?
Yes, we can see the dashboard.
Wonderful. So what we have on the screen now is the Cymulate administration dashboard. And I'm going to spend just about sort of 15-20 minutes just going through a couple of examples here so you can see not just all the wonderful things it does, because we're not going to get through all of that in 20 minutes, but I want you to see the actual workflow and how people really use the platform in real life. So first of all, on the screen, we have this contextual view of the kill chain. These are all of the individual security controls we have. And in the middle of each circle, there is a score. That is the risk score. That score is benchmarked against the NIST framework, CVSS version 3, and Microsoft's DREAD framework. So it's consistent, it's referenceable, and it is objective. So a score of 99 out of 100, which I would never see in the wild, but this is our demo lab with no email gateway, that tells me I have a fundamental problem. But a score of 31 out of 100 for the endpoint security, that's actually in the lower risk profile and actually is a reasonable score to start with. So instantly I get a good flavor for how well I'm doing and how badly I'm doing in different areas. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have these system alerts, which are flagging primarily things like new immediate threats. Here's one that was added today, new piece of ransomware moving very quietly on your network. We can actually test our ability to defend against that by clicking the launch assessment button, making a couple of choices and then hitting launch, and we are testing that one immediately. So really powerful for keeping on top of that risk score and making sure that you are defending against the latest and greatest. On the left-hand side of the screen, we see the option to run all of the assessments against all of the different security controls, and we're going to take a look at that shortly. But before we do that, just two pieces of housekeeping. The first, if I click my username, is that I can run this as a multi-site or multi-tenanted platform. So if I'm based in my office in Reading and I wanted to test my office in New York, I can just switch the user, and now I'm looking at the same platform, same interface, but with New York's risk scores. So this is a great way of testing across multiple sites, or if you're trying to standardize controls across a large organization, that's a really nice feature to have. The other piece of housekeeping, as I switch back into my main demo lab, is around integrations. So we have many integrations. Typically, we don't integrate with tools that we are testing because we're trying to be agnostic from those tools, of course, but there are three very common integration types. The first is vulnerability scanners. Why is it important? Your vulnerability scanner knows all the CVEs and vulnerabilities that exist on your devices. We know all of the exploits that can successfully target your organization. If you link the two together, we can then show you, here's the exploits that would leverage these vulnerabilities, and these CVEs exist on these particular affected machines. All of a sudden, you've got a prioritization list of the exploit, or the vulnerabilities rather, that you need to go and fix immediately. So for giving you like enriched data about your vulnerabilities, it's a really nice combination. The second is EDR platforms. So things like ATP, Microsoft, Cylance, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, you name it basically, enter your brand of choice. The benefit of integrating breach and attack simulation with an EDR platform is that we're identifying which malicious attacks or behaviors can successfully execute. You can then pass those attack indicators into your EDR platform and use them to fine-tune the detection rates of the EDR tool moving forward. It's used extensively by organizations like SentinelOne as part of their own testing and for running audits for their customers after they've deployed the solution. So it's a really, really well tried and tested integration. And the third is SIEM tools. So obviously we can pass off our results into your SIEM so you can actually have better visibility of what's going on. You can also alert your SIEM tool in advance to ignore test results or traffic from a particular node on your network where we're running our agent, so that you don't give people in your SOC team an absolute heart attack. If you want to give the people in your SOC team a heart attack, you absolutely can do. It depends on how mean you want to be. So if you have a third-party SOC, for example, and you wanted to validate whether they're actually doing the things they should be doing for you, you can run this in a blind mode and just launch a load of attacks and see whether the SOC responds and reacts effectively. So many use cases around SOC validation and effectiveness. All of that being said, let me give you a couple of examples. I'm going to start by showing you how an email assessment runs, because it's probably the most accessible of the assessments in terms of how it works and everyone's familiarity with email types of attacks. And after I've shown you this, I'm going to show you the endpoint module to give you a scale of the comprehensive nature of what the platform can do. But all of our modules look and feel the same, so it's very intuitive. What you have on the screen in the middle is a range of templates. Those templates ship with the platform as standard, and they cover all of the major exploit types within that particular security control. So for email, it's all about things like ransomware, worms, office payloads, malware. But you also have a template called best practice. And if you use this one, this is the one that will throw every particular exploit in that kit bag against the email gateway in this case. So that's the one that will launch 17,000 emails, give or take. And the benefit of doing that is you get a benchmark. You're basically doing very well against these, but you have a real blind spot with office payloads, for example. So most customers start by running best practice and then seeing what they're exposed to. To run it, you choose the email address of the device running the agent and you hit launch. And now you are ethically hacking your organization, completely safe, completely simulated, but you're in control of it. You can actually run this schedule it to run on a frequency of your choosing, set and forget, and then the system will give you the reports when it's finished. In this use case, our customers run the best practice assessment, identify maybe they've got an exposure to office payloads, remediate the office payload exposure, and when they come back and retest, rather than launching everything again, they could just use the office payload template, and rather than 17,000 emails, it's going to send less than 4,000 and take about an hour to run the test. So really, really quick and easy to get to grips with. That said, you have the ability to build new templates for all of these assessment modules as well. I'm not going to show you that in the interest of time, but that is where you can build and customize your own attacks and exploits based on things that you are most concerned about. So we've run our assessment. Let's have a look at the results. So we're going to choose the email report here. Now, clearly, this is a demo lab with no email gateway, hence the score. I'm not trying to scare anyone. This is not a normal test result, but the concept is the same. So across the top of the screen, we have some management widgets, what we are most and least vulnerable to. I'm not too interested in that today. In the middle of the screen, we have every subcomponent of the last email assessment. We can see ransomware as an example. Last tested on the 2nd of August, the penetration ratio, the risk, the impact risk, and the number of penetrated files. So we have a problem with ransomware. Let's click on it and see how bad the issue is. Now we've moved into phase 2 of the platform. This is remediation. Now on the screen, we have every individual piece of cryptoware that was successfully delivered into the inbox. If I keep scrolling down, it's going to auto-populate. On the right-hand side, there's 2 pieces of information. The first thing I get is a description. How did this get through my email gateway? In this case, an older version PowerPoint file format, nested in a .htm file. It has a piece of code execution in there, which is going to start encrypting files, and that's what it's going to do. Underneath that, you have mitigation advice. So first of all, if you do not need HTML files to be delivered via email, then block them or filter them at your email gateway. And if you'd like to filter them out, here's the string you can use to copy into your policy agent. However, if you do need them, or you're not sure if you need them or not, if you have any kind of more granular email controls like sandboxing or CDR, content disarm and reconstruction, then it doesn't look as though they've been configured stringently enough to detect, analyze, reconstruct, make benign, or whatever you've chosen to do with them. It's really powerful to understand how did it get through and what can I do about it. The challenge, like any tool, is alert fatigue. If you've got that many red flashing lights, where do you start? So across the top of the screen, you can filter this list. So let's focus on the high impact files first, or exploits. Let's focus on those that had specific file extensions that we could have sworn blind we were blocking at the gateway. Let's focus on those that were nested X number of times. And all of a sudden, we've cut down that list to the top 60 or so. We can export as a CSV, and we can start knocking through that list very, very quickly. This then rolls up into an executive report. There's two reports I'll show you. The first is specific to that particular security control, in this case, the email gateway. This is designed to share with the management team. I'm not saying you give all of it to the management team, but you can use this for reference with them. It's going to give you things they're going to understand: a risk score, a penetration ratio, the things that we are most and least vulnerable to. It's going to give insights. Too much information for most management teams, but it's there if you want to, someone wants to go into more detail. But the next 2 pages, very powerful. Benchmarking the organization against your peers. It's optional, it's anonymized, but it's there for those who like to compare and contrast. But more importantly, performance over time. If I zoom in, this gives you a flavor for how you can use this platform to go to your management teams and demonstrate what cybersecurity is doing and what you need. In this case, this could be a company that invested in a new email gateway 10 months ago. They've run an assessment every month. And over that time, they can demonstrate that for 6 out of the 7 standard exploits over email, the company's risk score has gone down, validating best use of company budget. However, one of those lines has gone up. Why? Well, that could be ransomware, and the reason could be everyone's working from home, Black Lives Matter, COVID-19, all of this clickbait, an increase in ransomware and phishing campaigns. That's why this one's gone up. As your head of security, as your head of IT, it's my recommendation that we purchase that ransomware module that we didn't buy last year, or that we spend 3 days of consultancy time to configure and improve our configurations. Do we have your agreement? And now you're giving an evidence-based piece of information to a board or to a budget holder who can now make a risk-based decision. And in that case, I'm guessing they're going to say yes. I'm hoping they're going to say yes. After that, you have action items, because again, just telling budget holders we need to buy a more expensive thing is very difficult. So being able to articulate, look, actually we can bring our risk score down by doing actions rather than spending money, is going to give you some credibility. In this case, we could reduce our risk score by as much as 60 points, almost 2/3, by blocking non-essential file types at the gateway. That doesn't have to involve buying product. It may well involve spending 1 or 2 days of internal time, or using a third party to come and do it or help you with it, but it's not necessarily going to have to cost the earth. And then finally, we show you the frameworks we use to generate the risk score and how we categorize risk into low, medium, and high. Very few of our customers try to get their score down to 0, because that's pretty hardcore. Most people will set a target based on their starting point and say, right, well, let's try and get down to 25, for example. And if we get there, we know we've got a relatively good peace of mind that we've done as best we can. And let's try and keep that score there or bring it lower over a longer period of time. The other report is a top-level view, which basically gives you this: a depiction of the kill chain with all of your risk scores that you could take to a security steering committee meeting or budget meeting, strategy meeting, anything, and say, this is what our security looks like. Not our pen tester said we might be exposed to privileged access abuse, but actually we categorically are exposed to it. And lateral movement controls, we have almost none. And here's how we did it, and we can quantify it. And now that's going to justify the need to go and spend that money on that particular project, rather than pen tester said PAM or pen tester said EDR or whatever it may be. Very powerful and used by all of our customers to report on their security on an ongoing basis at a senior level. I promised to show you the endpoint security module, which I will do, just as a counterpoint to email, so you can see the power of the platform. So if I click on the endpoint module, when this screen loads up, it's going to look very similar to the email module. You've got the same sort of templates, and you'll see things you're familiar with: behavior-based, malware, signature-based, ransomware, worms, all as different templates. But you also have this really tempting red button here, which is the red team button. And when I click on this one, this is going to show you the real granularity. So if you want to map into MITRE, what you're seeing on the screen right now is every individual MITRE technique and tactic that's on the framework. So if you had a specific project to work on the risk of lateral movement, you could focus on the particular tactics relating to that: credential access, lateral movement, discovery, privilege escalation, exfiltration potentially. And now you've got all of the MITRE tactics relating to attacks or tactics which are going to try and elevate privilege and move. And you could run all of these individually. You could run all of them at the same time. If you're not sure what one of them means, you can click on the reference, and it's going to take you to the MITRE ATT&CK website to learn all about that, and you can decide whether you want to run it or not. Really, really granular, really powerful, but you still have the ability to stay within those templates and cover the main things comprehensively. The reporting for endpoint testing, and I'll leave you with this. If I click on the report for endpoint testing, again, very similar look and feel. We've got ransomware here. If I click on ransomware, this is all about whether ransomware could execute at the endpoint. So here's a list of all the ransomware attacks. They didn't all execute fully, so the first thing I can do is filter the list by status. Let's look at those that executed completely. If I select any one of these, I now get a step-by-step process of whether it completed or not. So we can see in this case it completed completely, fully completed, and down the middle we can see every step of the way what it did, and we can select more information, which is going to give us a description of that particular exploit, relating back to MITRE. It gives us detection information so we can fix this and improve in the future, mitigation advice so we can tighten our controls, and if there is any, there's analysis which you can then use to fine-tune your other tools. Really powerful way of fine-tuning your endpoints. The last thing I'll leave you with, just to show you, I guess, security testing to the nth degree, is lateral movement testing. I'm not going to show you the lateral movement test, but I am going to show you a sample report. Because if lateral movement is on your project list, or it's something you do want to validate the effectiveness of, then this is going to show you that in very powerful graphic terms. The first thing here I've clicked on is the last lateral movement assessment I did, and you can see that we are able to identify all of these different resources and targets on the network. If I click on the technical report and just leave this to run for a couple of seconds, when this screen loads up, we are going to see that network map, that blast radius. And when it first loads up, it might make your eyes bleed. So I will zoom in as quick as I can. It's quite a scary report, but it's going to look like a there you go, like a blast radius. If I zoom in, this white circle in the middle is our patient 0. That's where our agent was starting as the initiator. This cluster here could be a network segment, and these blue circles are workstations. So, okay, fair enough, that might be okay. These amber circles are databases. And if I zoom out, any red ones are servers. So the question could be here, how was it possible for lateral movement to occur from Jim in Finance's PC and reach this server over here? If I highlight that server and click on call to action, I'm now seeing every hop across the network. It's using access token manipulation all the way across. We've leveraged the SMB protocol. Click on any of these: description, mitigation, detection, and examples of organized crime groups that will leverage SMB protocol to move laterally. Down the left-hand side of the screen, we can see more detail. So we were able to reach this device using a ticket from this device that was duplicated from this process on this protocol on this port, and we bypassed UAC. So we have a massive problem with overprivileged accounts in our organization. So this really gives you, hopefully, a view from how simple something could be, like an email test, very quick and easy to tighten those controls, but also how comprehensive the platform can be in identifying things that are really tricky, like lateral movement, and anything you want to do mapping into the MITRE ATT&CK framework. At that point, I've covered everything I think I wanted to on this session. The final thing, just to pull back up again on the screen, is just one final slide to leave you with, and we can take some questions. Everything we've talked about today is available through Celestics as our partner here in the UK, also a partner of ours over in the US. We do have the option with Cymulate to provide you with a free of charge proof of concept. You can use the link that is on this website here, on this screen here. And it's going to give you basically 2 weeks worth of the platform, plus a number of the modules that you can use to test. You're going to get access to the remediation advice and the reporting capabilities. And that's really useful if this is something you're serious about, because you can then use the output from that to build into your business case or your business justification for the budget. So it's going to give you the ability to demonstrate how it actually works in your environment. At that point, I'm not sure if there's been any questions via the chat, Natalie, but I'll hand back over to you and answer any questions as they come in.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, so there's no questions that I can see at the moment, but if any of you do have any questions, or you would like another demo one-to-one, or you would like a no obligation proof of concept, then please do get in touch with us. As Tim said, Celestics is an MSSP, so we can provide you with a demo anytime you like, and we can answer any of your questions anytime. So please do get in touch. My email address is natalie@celestics.com, and I will send you a copy of this presentation once it's available. And I will also send you the link for the 2-week sorry, getting my words mixed up today. I'll send you the link for the 2-week trial that Tim has already mentioned. So I think that's it now for today. I'll wrap up. And
Natalie, there was one question. Sorry, there's one just came in, which is about the prerequisites for the proof of concept or the free trial. So the free trial is something you could actually install the agent on your own laptop or workstation. You don't need a dedicated device for the free trial. There are a couple of prerequisites. You do need to have an account with privilege to install the agent, but then you can obviously downscale that to a standard user profile afterwards. You may need to whitelist our service in the cloud, because obviously we're sending 17,000 emails, so clearly that's going to be classed as a spam engine. We're not interested in whether we're a spam engine. We're interested in whether the emails we're sending can get through. So whitelisting our service in the cloud is a consideration. And you may want to whitelist our agent with your endpoint security control, because obviously, again, we're going to be dropping malicious payloads onto a device. We're not interested to know whether the EDR tool thinks that we're malicious, because what we're doing is deemed as malicious. We're interested in whether the payloads can actually deliver. So a little bit of whitelisting is really all you need to do to get this up and running. We would normally run a 1-hour session to get you up and running and operational. And after that, it's pretty intuitive and you'll be up and running in no time. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, all right, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll be in touch shortly. Thank you, bye.